How can data center construction and infrastructure companies improve their branding? How can a data center construction and infrastructure company improve its branding? That's a great question. And I think it's an especially timely time. It's for sure the right time to be addressing this. Why? Because I still come across a lot of people that believe that their branding is purely aesthetics. They're thinking about their brand guide. They're thinking about their tone of voice, the hexadecimal colors that you'll see in their logos and on their website and in their print and electronic collateral and their fonts and their logos. The reality, though, is in a self-propelled buyer's journey where 83% of the buyer's journey is over before vendor contact, your brand is no longer limited to just the factors that would normally be the domain of a creative director. Your brand is now everything that the marketplace says about you when you're not in the room. And given that you're no longer in the room for most of the buyer's journey, the first 83% of that buyer's journey, that is an enormous, enormous amount of gap that we need to fill between dealing with branding as if it's 10 years ago and dealing with branding today. So what can we do to dramatically influence how the marketplace talks about us when we're not in the room? Because your salespeople are really not going to be welcome in the room for much of the buyer's journey anymore. They're really getting squeezed out. So how do we get them back into these great conversations? Well, a lot of that comes down to repositioning, remodeling your sales approach, your sales playbook, your marketing playbook for how modern buyers now navigate and compare options and evaluate pricing and make these purchase decisions. And the way we do that is your salespeople, your marketing people can no longer show up as transaction focused. They need to show up as true subject matter experts. Increasingly more, I'm talking to sales leaders who have made such large investments in their technical skills that many of them could actually have a side hustle nights and weekends being a fractional CTO to small and medium-sized businesses. It's that next level. So if you have gotten to that level with you and your team, give yourself a nice pat in the back. You're on the right track. If you're still thinking the rules don't apply to you, I would challenge you to think about how many times a day you pick up this device yourself. Is it the first thing in the morning? First thing you look at in the morning when you get up? Is it the last thing you look at in the evening before you go to bed? Do you look at it anywhere from dozens to hundreds of times throughout the day? This is the remote control of our lives. And there's an excellent chance that your buyer personas, your most important stakeholders at the kind of companies that you want to do business, are spending their days the exact same way. Are you really going to tell me that the internal champion for a data center construction project, an infrastructure kind of project, is communicating with their vendors and partners using a fax machine or a dial-up modem or one of those paper envelopes that used to have the little red string that you tied around and you passed around from person to person and they initialed that you saw it? Are they getting their phone messages using those little pink while you were out messages? Now I'm really dating myself for things that happened in the earlier stages that I saw in offices happening in the early stages of the career. But like, if your buyers would laugh you out of the building if you asked them for their fax number, don't make your investments as if you think that that's actually how they're still doing business. The reality is even the most digitally resistant internal champions for things like data center construction and data center infrastructure, I can assure you, are spending a ton of time on their phones, asking their peers for expert opinions, watching videos, listening to podcasts, attending webinars. And if you don't realize this yourself, then it's time to go back to the drawing board and do your buyer persona research. Don't make these assumptions based on things that you think might be true, but may be off the reservation, completely wrong from the actual factual reality that's out there. That's why when it comes to identifying, after you've identified your ideal client profile and you're figuring out who are the buyer personas that you need to build relationships within these companies that need construction infrastructure, when you're segmenting out your buyer personas, you actually need real research to document their goals and their challenges. It's fine to talk to some internal stakeholders on your team and use that for a little bit of the research, maybe 20, 25%, but 80% of that research needs to come from actually talking to real prospects and real clients face to face or over video meetings or phone calls. Or if you don't have access to that, at the absolute minimum, study how they describe themselves on their LinkedIn profiles in their own words, study the kinds of content that they're sharing, study the kinds of events and topics that they're interacting with and that they're super interested about. That's going to give you the consensus in their own words about what they care about. And then we need to recognize that the overwhelming preponderance of buyers don't want to talk to sales until the absolute end of their journey. So in order for us to show up and have a role and be a factor in these early and middle stages of the buyer's journey, in order to influence the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the different options that are available for them for big construction infrastructure projects, we need to show up as a teacher, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, thought leader. And the way we do that is through content, through great videos, podcasts, webinars, live streams, and even offline versions of that where you're hosting your own events. If you're fortunate enough to be doing business in a geographic region where most of your prospects and clients live and work and they can get to your facility with a half hour to an hour drive, you should absolutely positively be hosting educational events with your most important buyer personas on a pretty regular basis. You could start with a quarterly lunch and learn series. You could start with quarterly breakfast seminars. If you have a medium to large size conference room in your building, or you have a training classroom, or you have access to be able to rent or barter or borrow a trusted partners kind of room relatively inexpensively, and you're not doing this kind of stuff, oh my gosh, are you missing out on an enormous opportunity to build really deep relationships with your most important prospects and clients? Because to go do major national and global events, you need to make investments that are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. To host these own events in your own training classroom or in your conference room, or a client or partner that's bartering with you or letting you use their space or something like that in return for a little bit of billing, you realize that nearly all of the expense and effort is really just getting the right people to attend. Bringing in catering for lunch or bringing in catering for breakfast, infinitesimally small relative to doing field events. The more important issue is getting the right people there. But if you're already doing the right things with defining your ideal client profile, your target account list, you're doing lead generation on a regular basis, this is the top and the middle of your funnel. This is also how you get the word of mouth going, because person one from a target account registers for this event. They get back an email that says, who else should be at this? We know that major data center construction and infrastructure projects take a village. Typically people from this role, this job function, that job title, what have you, 4, 5, 6 different people are involved. So given that, who else from your team should also join us for our breakfast seminar next month? Just hit the forward button, tell your colleagues why, and you'd be shocked how that basic email marketing automation thing that's been around for 20 years, how crazy effective that is in getting multiple stakeholders from the same company attending your in-person events or your virtual events or your roadshow or whatever, however you are doing this. So when it comes time to how you're going to improve your branding, the more you can get the right people in the right places at the right time to interact with you in the right context so that they see you and your team as the go-to experts in your space when it comes to construction infrastructure, that's your branding. That's your lead generation. That's your lead nurturing. That's your sales cycle acceleration. That's what gets deals on the deals board. That's what gets stuck deals unstuck, because you're most importantly educating and building trust. Educating and building trust. And you have a choice. You can be the one that's doing this, or other companies, other organizations, other media and events companies are going to fill that void. But make no mistake, they're learning from someone or someones. The more they're learning from you, the more they're spending time with people from your team, the more you're able to influence the criteria by which they evaluate and judge all of the competitive options that are in front of them. So when you do this right, you're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list. When you do this at an elite world-class level, you literally can knock competitors out of contention because you've built such a deep relationship with your most important prospects and clients by using events and education as a true differentiator throughout the full buyer's journey. So when it comes to how a data center construction and infrastructure company can improve its branding while simultaneously impacting revenue growth, remember the branding is about a lot more than aesthetics today. If the only person working on your branding is someone that's like a creative director, you're missing out on what branding truly is today. Branding is now anything and everything that the market says about your company when you're not in the room. And given that by default, you're not going to be in the room more than 80% of the time, we need to flip that on its head and get you back in the room. And the best way to get you back in the room is to show up early and often as teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, thought leaders. That's the key unlock with all of this when it comes to improving your branding for data center construction and infrastructure.